The court has had to respond to sort of a dizzying round of emergency applications from all over the country this week regarding the deadline extensions for when ballots would be received by states. They turned down an extension in Wisconsin, said that it couldn't go into effect, but at the same time, extensions in North Carolina and Pennsylvania can go into effect. And so it looks like it doesn't make much sense, but there is one sort of underlying factor in all of them. The court has been approving those that have been agreed to by state courts or state officials, and they have not been approving the ones that have been imposed by federal judges. In Wisconsin, it was brought by some civil rights groups and by Democrats who said there needed to be more time given for these ballots to be received and then counted. Wisconsin had a law that said they had to be received by Election Day. A federal judge held a hearing. He extended the deadline. That went to an appeals court. The appeals court said no, that the legislature decided that there were other ways to deal with this through early voting or other accommodations, and the appeals court would not go along with it. That took the issue to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed with the appeals court, saying, no, federal judges shouldn't be doing this, especially when the legislature has already said something about this. In North Carolina, it was a little different. The state already had a sort of grace period of a few days for ballots to be accepted. But Democrats and civil rights groups said that because of the pandemic, there needed to be more days. And so the state elections board agreed to that. And so in that case, the Supreme Court went along with lower courts who had approved this and said, because it was the state elections board and it was not just federal judges coming in to make these decisions, that new deadline should stand. Democrats and civil rights groups again went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and said that there should be an extension and some other accommodations made to make voting easier. And in that case, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed. They again extended this period for when the ballots could come in and still be counted until 3 days after the election. That went up the chain as well and arrived at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court voted on a 4-4 tie about whether to stay that decision. And because it was a tie, that meant that there weren't enough votes to grant what Republicans had asked for. Once it became clear that President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, was going to be confirmed quickly, Pennsylvania came back to the Supreme Court and asked again for them to take the case and to stay the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision. The courts again said no, but it brought a very angry dissent from Justice Samuel Alito, joined by Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch. And in that case, Alito agreed that it was too close to the election for them to take the case. But he said he thought the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision was probably unconstitutional, that the legislature is the one that should be making these decisions. And he held out the possibility that this could all come back to the Supreme Court after the election. In fact, Pennsylvania has agreed that it will separate out all of the mail-in ballots that it receives by 8 o'clock on November 3rd, which was the original deadline, and those that are received after that until 5 p.m. November 6th, which is the new deadline. And so those votes could be subject to challenge at some point after the election, depending on how close the vote is in that state. One thing that was interesting in the Pennsylvania decision was that Justice Amy Coney Barrett decided to sit it out. She had just arrived at the court the day before. She said through the court that she was not participating because she just got there. It had to be decided quickly, and she had not had enough time to weigh in on it. Now, that's interesting because usually justices don't explain why they recuse themselves. And Barrett seemed to be saying, I'm not making a pledge that I'm not going to get involved in any of these 2020 election cases, only that I'm not getting involved in this one in Pennsylvania, in this one in North Carolina. And it could be that there are enough justices who want to look at this issue that they take the case after the election. And Justice Alito even warned that maybe these votes wouldn't be counted.
Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd president of the United States.
We all remember 2000, right? Bush v. Gore, in which the court played such a pivotal role in deciding that the presidency was going to go to George W. Bush.
The real issue is, what does Article 2 of the Constitution mean in the first instance? And it delegates authority directly to the state legislatures.
And so the worry is that voters, through no real fault of their own, will apply for a mail-in ballot, get it, fill it out, vote by election day, but that it still won't be received in time to be counted. And so that's what the court has been fighting over in all of these sort of late-night emergency orders that have come out.